Well, hey, it's good to see you, man. Welcome to another episode of OTXNT. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm doing fine. You're the one that's scrambling with VBS and all the stuff happening and all the things.
I got right. You don't see this in front of me. I got uh those
Ooh.
things to like for the penny wars as we're doing our offering. Like my office is insane. This corner looks the same, but there's no like walking space in here. VBS is in full swing. In fact, we're an hour late in our recording. Told Andrew, "Hey, it was going to be at 1:30. Let's do that." And then Sam's Club trips and storm coming and trying to tarp your decorations outside an hour later. Here we are. So thanks for waiting on me.
Yeah, no, I'm happy about it. Just just working while I'm waiting, so no problem, but the exciting thing is that we got a lot to talk about. Oh my goodness.
Oh boy, yeah,
Um,
we do.
what's our plan today?
Well, look, so for you who are watching it currently now, you know that we are only a few days past watching the attempted assassination of Donald J. Trump at a rally in Pennsylvania. And so there's been a lot there to kind of sift through and to talk about. I mean, there's so many different angles that as they relate to the Christian that we need to talk about. So that's what I'd like to do is just kind of a almost a news roundup, but there's some big theological pieces that we got to talk about that come with it. So anything, and I'm talking, man, from the strangest of the strange to like the absolutely miraculous. So I want to talk about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, let's go for it. Let's jump into prayer and then we can just see what we can get done in our time.
Let's
Please
do it.
join me in the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever and ever. Amen.
Amen.
All
So
right.
look, to me, Andrew, and I don't know about you, but I feel like this is one of those moments in history. It was going to be like one of those, it's going to be, where were you when this happened, right? Like, what were you doing? Kind of everything kind of froze and times went slow this past Saturday as we're all waiting, watching, like, what's going to happen? Because even though he got up, right, and afterwards and did that awesome, fight,
Yeah,
and
fight,
then went
fight,
in,
fight.
blood dripping down his face, the American flag, but like, even though the optics of that, like I know just from that, I was thinking about this. We had missionaries overseas that we knew of that um even after something terrible went down, one of them was able to call us and talk through it and seemed to be fine and didn't realize that there were other things that went on, bullet stuff that then it was only later on that they died. Like, so in my mind, I'm like, there's nothing, there's no telling how
Yeah.
bad this is really is. And so that was crazy on Saturday.
Yeah, it was the craziest thing. We were driving back from Phoenix, and I'm getting a text, and I'm thinking about someone's asking me about something that's completely unrelated, and then we end up watching the news, and I'm with my boys and my wife, and it's like, wow, this is the craziest thing ever. And of course now, there's been a lot of comment between then and now, so we're a little bit late to the game on some of this, but it's almost helpful too because we've had a chance to debrief it a little bit. But yeah, there was just nothing in my life that can compare to what
No,
happened. I mean, Trump just doing his thing, and then all of a sudden, they grab the ear, drop it down, and you think, "What? Whoa, what is happening?" And the news media refusing uh, to say the obvious, and whatever. They're following.
that was
Yeah,
incredible.
yeah.
Babylon B had a great time.
Oh,
Babylon B and then Not the B had a great time satiring how bad it was in terms of trying to get real information from the legacy media.
yeah. I mean, they really didn't want to say what was obvious, and of course they got to be careful. So I'm not too worried. It didn't take long, but anybody that was watching the video knew what was happening there. And
Yeah,
they were, oh,
yeah,
maybe it's glass. Maybe he hurt when he hit the ground. I'm like, no, he just got shot in the ear.
yeah.
It was just crazy. And of course, lots of questions about how did this happen, but I mean, you just got to say this guy is an incredible human being. I mean, just hopping up and you know like if you're a man and you watch that and you weren't moved in a deep place in your soul, I don't know. It's just like him or hate him. That is just it was an incredible moment, and I think it won the election in that moment. But who knows? There's a lot of time between now and then. But
Exactly.
yeah. Um, but that's kind of how I was watching. And of course, they just kept repeating it over and over. And every time
Hmm.
you do it, you're like, this actually happened. This is unbelievable. Since I've seen the computer imagery that people are doing on the internet, where, it shows his head from up high and how the bullet would go. And you're just,
Yeah.
okay. So, and then Lindsey Graham, right? Fate stepped in. And I think that's kind of the jumping point that we wanted to, I don't think it was fate, Dr. Pate.
No, no.
What do you think?
So yeah, I mean, so I thought this was a perfect launching point because I think there's been some good theological discussion that's been happening about what happened, right? Should we talk about this theologically? And so yeah, Lindsey Graham says fate stepped in. People will say, well, it was how lucky, right? How lucky he is to be alive. But let's talk about like theologically, what do we really actually know? What does the Bible teach about those things? Is it a coincidence? I mean, and what I have absolutely loved is put into perspective. If you've seen like the AI models now of, if you watch the, and I wish we could link it. I don't know. We got to figure out how to do this better. We can like real time show that. But like if you see, it's the fact that he turns his head, and if the fact that he turned his head for just a second or two, had he had not turned it, the bullet would have gone straight and blew off the back of his head. And so you got to ask the question like, was that just a lucky turn, right? Was that
Yeah.
just what that is? And I think that we have to come back to this biblical view of providence. I think the first person that I saw that was front out the gate saying like we need to understand what this is all about is providence was Al Mohler. He was the one I saw that from. And since then, I've seen some other people talk about providence. But you know what? Providence has been a great discussion that I've been thinking through and talking about because on Wednesday evenings, I teach a class called Questions. And in the class questions, we're going through the London Baptist, well, the Catechism. So the Baptist Catechism that came out, and one of the things that we're doing is we're just kind of exploring some of the old stuff that people used to teach. And so we're talking about providence. So in Baptist Catechism, so this is what is this 1693, I think, is pretty sure 1693 is the catechism. What are God's work of providence, right? It says God's work of providence are his most holy, wise, powerful, preserving, and governing of all his creatures and all their actions, right? And so what theologically we're talking about is that God is over everything, sovereign over everything. And so just a couple of verses I'd throw out to kind of put there is obviously like I love this one in Colossians 1. And I know I'm getting to your area in Pauline stuff, but like I love this verse when he talks about with Christ. He says he is before all things, and by him all things hold together. I love that image of that, like Christ is the reason that like all things hold together. And of course, my go-to, the one that just like floors me every time, is the one of Jesus talking about that how God is over all of creation. And is it? I think it's Matthew. Let me just see,
Yeah,
Matthew
10:29, the
ten
sparrows.
29.
Yeah.
Yeah, read it. What does it say?
Uh, are not two sparrows sold for a copper coin? And oh goodness, hang
Are
on.
you reading? You're just doing it off your memory.
I was reading it, and then my browser just told me that the page isn't responding and stuck a
I'll
frame
finish it
right in
for
front
you.
of it. So
Aren't two sparrows sold for a penny, and yet not one of them falls to the ground without your father's consent? Even the hairs on your head have all been counted, so don't be afraid. You're worth more than many sparrows, right? And so, like, that's saying that, like, if you really grasp what Jesus is teaching there, right? He's saying that birds, the most insignificant, I mean, you think like, I don't like birds, right? I don't like, but he's saying like even the most kind of like insignificant animals, you know, I don't think he's using that as the most. I'm just saying that they don't fall to the ground without the Father's consent. Meaning he knows when they're going to go, and when they go, it's because he's ready for them to go. Even that's how in control of everything God is. So theologically speaking, and there's tons more verses. I don't know if you have anything you want to contribute to those teaching. But theologically speaking, right?
yeah,
When God's ready for him to go, he'll have him ready to go.
Yes, and I was listening to someone who was trying to make a point. Of course, this is going to be an area where Arminianism and Calvinism and kind of how God chooses to operate that sovereign control uh, will divide camps. But some were saying, if you just think God stepped in this moment to do something miraculous, your view of providence and sovereignty is deficient. God is actually in control of all things at all times, and uh, I think God is in control in a sense of absolutely he is allowing everything to happen. He's orchestrated the system. He is sovereign overall. And yet somehow within that sovereignty, he still allows for a human response. Um,
Absolutely.
and how does that work for someone who's omniscient and all powerful, omnipotent? How can someone know everything's going to happen and remain completely all powerful and not orchestrate everything that's happening all
Yeah.
the time, which would, really fleshed out would make all human will and response completely uh, unrealistic. It's just a mirage. So yeah, I don't want to go that far because I don't land that far, but certainly God is in control and He knows every hair on our heads. He knows every sparrow that falls. He knows every bullet that flies. And this should be a moment for all Americans to just praise the Lord that God, in His grace, did not allow that bullet to strike its target because, or take the life of Donald Trump because it would have torn our nation absolutely apart in a moment.
Yeah.
That to me is the gracious act. I don't necessarily want to read too much into the conclusions yet. If we're still working through the idea of providence and sovereignty, you got other verses you
Yeah.
wanted to bring up?
Well, I mean, there's plenty more that you could look at when you talk about the idea of providence, right? So, like you'll see, um, like in Acts 17, let me just do this one. I'll kind of round this one. There's something, but I like Acts 17, what Paul says. Acts 17, I think, what does he say? Come on, software. Uh, he says, man, why did I have the right one? Acts 17, 24 through 25. That's what it is. And so here's what he says in that. He says, the God who made the world and everything in it, he is Lord of heaven and earth. He does not live in shrines made by hands, neither is he served by human hands as though he needed anything, since he himself gives everyone life and breath and all things. I mean, you think about that. That's the idea. So our breath continuously comes from God. It's just this
Yeah,
picture that God is the reason of why we are sustained even still. Now that brings up a lot more, like you had said. Like there's another piece of this that I don't want to wade into today, but the idea of free will, the idea of if God is over all things, what's He doing? But that is one of the things that we
yeah,
can affirm. So when Paul does say that he causes all things to work to the good for the good of those who are called according to His purpose, right? That is saying that even in the bad,
right.
right? Even in the bad, he will take those because he is sovereign and he works it according to his own will, right? So that's important
Yeah,
to keep in mind as well, is that he takes and allows for bad and he will ultimately work it towards his own goods. That's how in control he is. Nothing is outside of his control. And so when I guess when I look at all of this and I could see is um, that it was absolutely God making him move his head. Now, whether he did it or God just put it in his mind to move his head, right, to go look at this thing, God was orchestrating that because God has a purpose. He's not done with him just yet.
right,
There's
right.
God has something in mind that he's doing. Now, look, you and I, like we said, we're only a few days out on this. We don't know. It could very well be that something else terrible could happen. It was just that wasn't the day to have it happen. There's like we don't know in the grand scheme of everything. We're just looking at what we see right now, trying to process this. But I do think that yes, God allowed for that. Who knows? God may take something like this and work it for the good of our country. It seems like that could very well be that, but it could very well become a completely different direction. All we know right now is it was a good thing for him. And I do think that leads into something else, right? Which is this discussion of so what would happen? What's going to happen to him? My hope, my prayer is that leads him to the
Yeah.
same place that we're saying, which is, um, God has spared you for a reason. What are you going to do about it now?
Right, right. And what was good, I talked about briefly on Sunday. I didn't want to make the whole service about the context, and at the same time, I didn't want to shrink back and not address it. That's the hard thing as a pastor in situations like this. Everybody in the church is thinking about this, and
Yeah.
the temptation is to take the focus off of Christ. But I think that this points to Christ, right? And for those that are, well, he just got lucky. Okay, the pictures that have come out as a result of this, it's almost like God is just screaming. Not only did I save his life, I gave him the greatest photo ops of the 21st
Yeah.
century. Um, and I love the way Doug Wilson responded. Look at that photo again. All right, it was obviously staged, just not by Trump. And of course, his hand
Mm.
looks like he's almost holding the flag. We have the Secret Service agent. She's too short to cover his body, and of course, we get into a whole thing about Secret Service, and that would be interesting. But
Hmm.
regardless, their job is to cover his body with their bodies, and she's not capable. But because of that, he's towering over her and holding it up. And he's a tall man. I couldn't cover his body, but
Mm.
it's an epic photo, and the blood. Um, you couldn't stage that any better than it actually happened. It was just unbelievable. And these are just kind of things to recognize that that's going to be in every history book. That's going to be a moment that's burned into people's minds, and it's just unbelievable. And it's one heck of a coincidence if you don't have a view of providence and sovereignty. Now, the thing that I don't like, and maybe stop me if I'm going too fast,
Yeah,
uh,
go.
was all the Twitter stuff about, hey, he was shot at this time at 6:11. We go to the Bible, we go to the next verse, and
Yeah, yeah,
armor of
yeah.
God, and all of that stuff is really, I think, a dangerous thing to engage in. And it is kind of interesting. Yes, the armor of God verse would follow, but of course, you got to jump into a book of the Bible. The verse and chapter markings weren't even there until
Yeah.
centuries after
Well,
Christ.
like
Uh,
Bible code, pop,
yeah,
like
um,
it's quite ignorant. It's not how it was. I mean,
yeah.
that was like that's coincidence. Cool. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Like you can't do that. You can't just be like, oh, if you just because you remember when the Bible code came out, that was the
Yeah.
whole thing of like if you just put the numbers in or the name, like it'll like no, that's not how this thing works.
No,
You know,
and
good
it
passage for sure, but
right,
not how that
right.
works.
And I pray that he was wearing the armor of God. And I pray, I quoted the Reagan diary statement after he had survived his assassination attempt. And he basically said, I owe every day from now on to God. And Trump came out with great thanks to God for sparing his life. And I hope that he will then operate with this idea. I think the danger for Christians right now is to say, yeah, I believe that God blessed Trump, spared Trump, and has a purpose for Trump. I don't believe that that means Trump will fulfill that purpose in the positive sense that God desires. And I pray that he does. I think we really need to pray for him right now. And then, it's been very disappointing with the RNC and the direction that
Hmm.
they've headed. And I feel like you see God step in and do something unbelievable. Just you don't notice when the sparrow falls, but the Father does. This was such a grand entrance of God to prove to us how he is intervening in the affairs of men, to quote Ben Franklin, I believe. And then to turn around and have a Sikh pray into the high places are standing.
Yeah.
And I would see someone put on Twitter, just remember he wasn't supposed to even be there. And the conspiracies are floating, right? That this might not be him. This could be the RNC. Well, he is the RNC, and I'd like to give him some time to see if he really will turn to Christ and lead with Christ. And the RNC is not the church. I get all that. We can go down that road if we want. But it is kind of one of these things that I see God has done a miraculous work. He has to recognize, and you could see even at watching his reaction on the RNC, he's emotional. There's something that he recognizes, and he's not supposed to be there. So I hope that
Yeah.
he sees that movement, and of course, we should extend it to the breath that we are breathing to have this conversation is a blessing of God keeping us
Yeah.
alive, and every moment is that. But this is somewhat remarkable and out of the norm, and it should just point us to a great praise to God's glory and continued prayer that God would help Trump to make the right decisions, as it
Yeah.
looks like he is probably going to be the next president of the United States. Uh, it's just it's hard for me to believe that he won't be unless something catastrophic happens. And I'm also praying for his safety because whoever wanted him dead, if it wasn't the lone shooter, lots of people are actually grieving the fact that the young man missed.
Hmm.
And it didn't take long for the denouncing of this moral crisis to fall right back into the same political baloney.
So yeah, man, I'll tell you, I keep thinking, yeah, will this be a moment for him to draw near? Because obviously, I kind of look at him like, yeah, I think he definitely has been um, very friendly towards Christianity, right?
Yep.
But at the same time, there's been like, especially you look at towards the RNC, very kind of worldly, ecumenical kind of a thing. Um, and to some extent, like that was the trajectory, and he shot Saturday, so I don't think if there's a change, right? I'm trying to also be mindful. If there's a change that a lot of that stuff wasn't going to be, you ain't going to switch all of that up last
Yep.
minute like that, right? But I also think, I think that, yeah, you need to be, I think God has allowed for things and to try to get a hold. I think if for any person, not just the president, right? That any person who has an experience like that should stop and say, why was I allowed to live?
Yeah.
And so my mind goes to like Daniel 4, where it's like Nebuchadnezzar has this dream and it's at the end of that, like he's so prideful in and of himself and is like looking at all that he has done and how great he is. And then the words of in Daniel 4:31, while the words were still in the king's mouth, a voice from heaven said, King Nebuchadnezzar, you're to declare that the kingdom has departed. It is declared as the kingdom has been departed from you. You'll be driven away from people to live with the wild animals. You'll feed on the grass like cattle for 7 periods of time until you acknowledge that the Most High is ruler over human kingdoms and he gives them to anyone he wants, right? Like that idea that like God is over it all and he'll give it to anybody he wants, he'll take it away from anybody that he wants, right? And so you hope that like they have a moment because even in that story it says, he looks up and has this recognition, right? That he says, I praise the Most High and honored and glorified him who lives forever. His dominion is an everlasting dominion. His kingdom is from generation to generation. All the inhabitants of the earth are counted as nothing. And he does what he wants with the army of heaven, the inhabitants of the earth. There is no one who can block his hand or say to him, what have you done? Now, what I love about that too is people get all worried about, about world events sometimes. And even that has shown us, even those verses there, like God can change things in a moment, right? And
Yep.
so I'm just looking at this all and saying, I think God's doing something. I don't think
Yep.
that's that far on a limb to say I think he's doing something and his hand is not going to be thwarted. But the focus is Nebuchadnezzar has to have this humbling, this experience to recognize it's all gone. And my hope is that there's the same thing as that, like a real strong. I'm not saying much he claims to be, right? But I would love to see that if he was very nominal, that it would draw him closer. And if not, if it was just kind of name
Yep.
only, that it would be there you go. So I got another question for rapid fire, some theological stuff for you.
All right.
Um, you want to finish this? Because I got two other areas I'd like to explore, all connected to this.
Yeah, well, I would just reiterate what you're saying, and nobody could watch what happened. No Christian, in my mind, can watch what happened and not see that God spared his life, and there's got to be a purpose. And maybe that purpose only extended so far as to avoid a civil war because many Christians are praying for the nation. But it's also extending a chance to Donald Trump to be the instrument that might, if he gets elected, to be an instrument that executes power according to God's design for what is good and what is evil. And that's my prayer, is that we move in that direction. I also pray that Joe Biden will have clarity restored, almost like the Nebuchadnezzar story that you had. I'm not sure how many days our current president is really in full control of his intellect, but I pray that he would fully embrace Christ and that he would then execute policies in accordance with that belief, because I don't know what's going to happen. Uh,
Yeah.
so we aren't, and this is why the scripture is so important. There's miracles in the Bible. I always love this when we were doing historical theology or historiography. And what's more important, that God parted the Red Sea or that God told us why he parted the Red Sea, right? Um, And we need revelation to understand God's motives. And so we can't necessarily definitively say, and this is where people are getting dangerous on social media and in certain religious sectors to say this equals that. We don't have a definitive way of knowing exactly what God's going
Yeah.
to do, like we have in the scriptures. But what we can do is see the hand of God and pray and ask that the best things would happen. But we should be grateful because we were spared, I think, uh, just a terrible time of violent response. If that bullet had taken his life, I think there would have just been horrific violence throughout the land. So at least that didn't happen.
Yeah.
And I'm very optimistic for what he could do. And so I think that's exciting.
I think it's also something else to say and to kind of close this is how much God is sparing things that we don't even have any clue of, right? Like, um, God knows the potential for what could be. And that's something I'm actually preaching on this on Sunday. It's in Exodus 13. I think it's verse 17, 18 area where it talks about he doesn't send Israel up to just up into Canaan because the Philistines were there. And if they saw war, they would want to go back. Like he knows what they would do if this happened, right? And so he knows scenarios and possibilities, all possibilities. That's kind of like if you want to get that's like the to me like that Molinist kind of thing of right, like
Yeah.
every possibility of everything. Like it's just interesting to think about. But anyways, okay, so I want to move to kind of a little bit more of a lightning round, lighthearted thing if you want to do this, all connected to this.
All right. All right.
All right. So I don't know if you've also seen connected to all of this, the modern day kind of like charismatic prophets talking about the assassination. Have you seen some of these videos?
Uh, God in his grace has not put many of those in my feed. So
Oh
I'm
man. Oh man.
excited.
Okay. So here's the deal.
I know
I've
what you're
warned
talking
my
about, though.
congregation. What was that?
I know what you're talking about because, there's the fireman prophecies that are all the prophecies that came up in the first round, you
Yeah. Well,
know.
so I warned my church group about this, about like get ready because as we get towards election, all the prophets and the dreamers are going to come out and they're going to say, and then I don't get it. Like, why is it that some of these people, they don't have like, they're not accurate most of the time. And yet people continue to listen to them. So a couple that I saw, kind of come through. One is a guy who's just saying, hey, there's going to be an attempt. He's, on his life, and we just need to be ready for that. And God's going to thwart it, though. And that was just very vague, and that's old. But the most recent one that I saw come down and make its rounds on Twitter or X was the guy. It's about 3 months ago. There was kind of a charismatic uh, uh, prophet guy, and he said that in his dream, um, Donald Trump speaking, and bullet shot towards his head, and it blew up his eardrum, and he goes to the ground, blood, on the ground in his ear, and drops. And as he's dropped, he says he's praising the Lord and all of that, and gets radically saved. So that one resurfaced recently, apparently, because of it. It's a fairly interesting one of like, okay, well, maybe it's like I guess there's some little bit of a grace in that. Like I don't know what happened to his eardrum. I don't know about that, but here's this guy saying he sees something happen to him, hits his ear, drops down, and has this conversion, right? And so like people are sending this around. I've seen this and like, it's true. And I guess look, here's the deal. You want to just be careful with this stuff. Because I don't know how accurate that truly is. I think, if you were going to have a vision that somebody was going to be assassinated and they're going to go for a headshot, right? Um, and survive. Yeah, I mean, I guess you could say they got a headshot and they survived, or I guess the ear. I mean, so like I want to be
Yeah.
careful with that. I don't put a lot of stock into that, but that's one I've seen. I just don't think that that's. I don't know. Do you ever get sucked into those things too, man? Of like the every now and then, you're like, I don't know, could be, but it just seems
Yeah.
too weird to me.
Uh, yeah, I mean, I've got a little Baptist in me.
Yeah,
And so I want to say God can do whatever God wants to do. And if he chooses to reveal mysteries and visions in such ways, he can. And he didn't say that he never would.
yeah,
I usually try to figure out, okay, so he gave you this prophecy, but to what end?
Yeah.
Because basically the prophecy would validate the messenger or the prophet.
Yeah.
And of course, it wasn't 100% accurate if there's no blown eardrum or something. But you could just
Exactly.
say, I saw this in my dream and he misinterpreted it. And we
Yeah.
did something about this, I think, where we talked about the capacity to misinterpret, which is
Yeah.
why we've got to be really careful about these things. I don't want to grieve the Holy Spirit and give something to a demonic force that actually is of God. I just
Yeah.
think I got to be real careful. But and I would also want our people to be really careful because most of this stuff it's the end to the what end is, hey, this guy got it, hooray. Well, was there then a voice that said, and this is what I'm going to do with my servant, through this conversion? I don't know. Are we all supposed to believe that Trump now has fully embraced Christ at a level that was not known before, and he's going to just
Yeah.
be our champion? We hope for that. Um, but I don't know that I know that to be true. What I feel like right now is that they needed to prove his Christian bona fides when he ran the first time, and they needed Pence, and they needed other people to help us think that this guy actually was truly saved. And then they assume that the Christian audience right now is so in the tank that we recognize if the Republicans don't win, the left is jumped the shark on so many things that we have to vote Republican. And so
Yeah.
now they're reaching out to constituencies that really are opposed to Christian belief to make a broader tent. This takes us kind of beyond our discussion for the day, but uh, at some point in time, if this is if there was this amazing conversion experience, we are going to see him step in and not just name God, but name the name of Jesus, and not just have a generic "I'm here and we're going to fix the borders," but some sort of grander purpose. Because when he goes on from this life, the borders are fairly meaningless, right? So what's more important than the American border situation is the American soul, and I'd like to see him start speaking toward that but I don't want to get too excited too soon. I don't know what's going to happen, but I
Yeah.
do get nervous about these. And then what's the motivation? And I don't want to I don't want to condemn something that might be
Yeah.
possible. But I'm
Well,
usually fairly skeptical of these things as a starting point. Um,
I am too. And I think you can always discount the ones that like it's always the angle of come to me and sow a seed, right? Those people are like you can tell. The others you're like I don't know. I don't know what the point is if it's just kind of a anyways. Okay, that's lightning. That's first one.
okay.
Second one. Okay. Questions inevitably I've gotten already too. Your thoughts on is the is the shooting of his ear connected to Revelation 13 of the beast's fatal head wound, um, and that this is the mark, right, that shows that he was dead and should have been dead. That kind of, what are your thoughts on that? Huh?
Okay. I actually had a discussion with a family member recently, and we were talking about someone wondering if Trump was the Antichrist. And then this happened, and that was the first joke that was made. Another family member was asking if Trump was the Antichrist, and I was talking to the one that relayed this to me. It's like, well, there you go.
Yeah,
The head wound that has been healed. I think this is not likely that because one, I'm not sure that that even has anything to do with the future. That might be past if you got a preterist view of some things.
yeah,
If it is futuristic and it's going to happen in the future, the idea was that this was a mortal wound that had been healed, not just a glancing ear wound. So I don't think it fits the text very well. The idea
yeah,
is that this person appeared dead and was alive, and I think it
yeah,
has to do with the devil imitating Satan imitating the resurrection somehow through this head wound that is healed. So I don't think anyone feels like there was a miracle of healing here. There was a miracle of turning and reading the prompter in such a way that took his head out of the line of sight. And so
yeah.
I would say no. I would say this doesn't fit.
Well, and I guess also you have to make sure it's like, is the beast a person or is the beast an empire? Right. I mean,
Yeah.
that's another thing to kind of consider. I think there's a lot that's going on there that you just don't know. I don't think you can make that correlation. And then also, you got to watch of like, okay, well, you might say, okay, sure, but like what has come out of his mouth, right? And what you just you can't just make a jump and say, hey, he got shot towards the head and he should have died. I think you
Yeah,
can't do that.
right. Why not Steve Scalise? Why not our Congresswoman who got uh,
Gabby
um,
Giffords.
Gabby Gifford? That was
Yeah.
horrible.
Yeah.
So yeah, well, I'll take a pass on that. There's too
Yeah.
many too many things. I will say though that the RNC to me is not looking like a Christian movement. So who knows? Maybe there is an antichrist platform being laid out with the auspices of deceiving the church. I'm a little cynical today on that stuff. I should back off a little bit, but
I get
nevertheless,
it. I get it.
yeah,
But I think it's just something that I saw one person say this, that it's evidence that it's evidence that Christians have disengaged from the political process, and it's a challenge. It's a wake up call that Christians should be involved, right?
yeah,
And that we should be so forceful that our views are represented there. And the problem is, and I'll say this, and then I know that this is not where we wanted to go with this, but I do think, largely speaking, Christians have been told for years. I think the pendulum swings too far from the moral majority stuff of like, we're never going to solve things politically. And so Christians disengaged,
yeah,
and they're just don't. And so people are like, well, these people don't really do anything. They're not involved or anything. And so I think that's evidence of like, you know what? I think, Christians should fight to have a viewpoint. They should, that it should be that we should be seeking to put people in who are Christians. And that's something you and I have
yeah,
said many times, right? That the way that you do this is you're not going to legislate morality. You're not going to save people from laws. That's going to happen from going in the gospel, going out from your lips to other people. But there is something to be said about legislating and from a Christian worldview. And that's an important piece that you can't let go. And so Christians, I think it should be a wake up call to engage
yeah.
and to make your voice heard for sure.
Yeah, and I'll just say, unhappy where it's going, not despairing, because I see what they're trying to do, and I don't. The RNC is not the extension of the Christian church, so that's fine. However, Christians need to be engaged, and if they push too hard and they lose the evangelical base, they will not win.
Yeah.
And right now, they're taking that a little bit for granted. But there's been Christian representation at the RNC too. They're just trying to have this uh, everybody welcome kind of attitude.
Yeah.
So stay engaged. I agree. I think, and then I would say we do need a little time to see how this plays out in Trump's own mind
Yeah.
as to why. And he ought to be asking Lord, why, Lord, what do you have me do?
Yeah.
So it'll be very, very interesting. And we definitely have to do something about, can Christians still vote Republican? Because I think there's a lot of people that are thinking about opting out. And I don't believe that's probably the right move here. But
And I'll just say,
yeah,
if you're listening to this and you don't know what we're talking about, it's the big hang up that both Dr. Marquez and I both have is the seemingly taking out the language, the pro-life language out of the RNC platform, right? That like no party now,
yeah,
major party, there is nothing in there pro-life. It just seems to be that it right now, the platform is, we're not going to really deal with that. We're not really going to talk with that. Largely speaking, though, I would say there's a big chunk that are, right? But I think they're trying to take that off the table. But yeah, you're right. Like there's nobody. eh, that's a whole other conversation, because you have
yeah.
to look at what has been done versus what's stated. And you'll see that so much has been done from the party that, anyways. Yeah.
Yeah. And I would, there's also been weakening on traditional marriage and our stance there. And so I would say that I think the high places, if we look at the high places of ancient Israel that they never tore down,
Yeah.
that was always the sin. Even if a king was relatively good, he failed to tear down the high places and restore
Yeah.
proper worship. I think our high places right now are, unborn lives are being taken, and then this rainbow morality. And we just got a weaker platform on both of those than we had before.
Yeah.
And it's weaker, and the states are still vibrant, but it's something that we should be aware of, and we should be very active
Yeah.
about the future on that. And so, but I'm not at a point where it's like, well, I'm
But
going to throw my hands up.
yeah.
You know,
But I
so
think you're right. I think it's key to understand that that a biblical perspective is that a party and a person is not going to is not going to change anything, right? Like that we need to keep that in mind, that I cannot fully align myself with any person or party, because ultimately those are going to let you down,
Yeah.
and those do not reflect Christ. And so that's just something to just, it's not good to wrap yourself in the flag of a party, and wrap yourself up and to unite those as one, but I do think you need to wrap yourself in the Christian flag and truly continue to push that. I think we want that.
Yeah.
But anyways, yeah, I think I'm not down for like wedding the two together. And like, because yeah, you're right. Like that does not kind of it, the platform does not fully um reflect a biblical view.
Yeah.
In fact, it doesn't reflect in some spots. It takes things out. But that being said, there's another conversation probably you don't have to do as we get closer to November.
Yeah.
So what does a Christian do? What are you looking at? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you got any other rapid fires?
No, those are the two big
Those are the two.
ones, is the charismatic dreams and the fatal head wound. Those were my two big ones today that have come in. I got nothing. If you got any questions, shoot them in the comments bar for sure.
Yeah, one distinction I thought would be helpful. Roger Olson writes kind of from an Arminian perspective, and I wouldn't call myself an Arminian nor a full Calvinist, but he does discuss the idea of sovereignty, of sovereign de jure versus sovereign de facto. And I think this is helpful that God is sovereign, um, de facto. He truly is, but sovereign de jure, sovereign of the day, he has chosen to allow us to operate within his program. And so he is not forcefully requiring us to respond in the ways that he would like us to respond. In fact, oftentimes we rebel against what he's laid out. And I think that has always been a helpful way. But when you do see something so remarkable as what we saw with this failed attempt, I mean, multiple rounds. It wasn't just the one round that missed; all of the other rounds
Yeah,
missed,
you're absolutely
and
right.
it's just it's an incredible moment, and it should get us, I think, excited about the future and the fact that we were spared a terrible tragedy. And now let's do the work. I see. I mentioned it before we started. I've really been drawn to Jeroboam, and God gave him a plan and a kingdom, and He said, "Now go do what's right." And Jeroboam did not, and it was a
Yeah.
very sad deal. And so this is the kind of thing that you see in the Kings, that there is power and there is a program that God gives, and He miraculously installs people, and then they either do or they don't do what God
Yeah.
wants them to or calls them to. And so this is not necessarily a guarantee. So I guess the one thing I would say is you probably have a few people in your church or people that are listening to us that are like so gung-ho Trump that it almost becomes like this is God's signal from heaven that this is my anointed one for
Yeah.
this time, and I would be very very nervous about that. But I do think that you can't miss that God has done something remarkable. But I mean, how do you respond to that idea of it, it's undisputable now that Trump is the
Yeah.
guy?
Well, I just think you say it's undisputable that God has done something, right? What you don't know is what is that something. So everybody needs to be meditating on the fact that he should be dead, but he's not, right? And he definitely needs to be. But for Christians, you have to get back to, I don't know what it is that he's doing. I don't know what God's, but I can't go much further than the fact that God had him survive today, right? And because you don't know if God is going to, and that's what I think kind of goes back to some of the charismatic kind of prophecies, because there's some of these come out that there's going to be, the way that they talk about some of this stuff of what will come as a result, and they're painting this picture like, oh, what it's going to look like. You don't know that. None of us know that, and I think that's all you can say is what I know is, and go back to how we frame this today is, I know how providence works. I know how God's sovereignty works. And because God's sovereignty is so multi-layered, right? Think about that, right? Like God's sovereignty is more than just what you're seeing go in front of you. God is doing so many different things in the background. And think about even that audience there. How many different people are affected? What's that going to do to their lives and all of that? Like there's so much more going on. And then not only is that, what's that doing for our nation? What's that doing I mean, there's no way to even calculate that. And so I do not think it is the equivalent to say, though, that that this is my, like, there is no, like Isaiah to come out and to say like, this is Cyrus, my chosen instrument. There is no Jeremiah to say, this is Nebuchadnezzar, my servant. Right? There's nothing like that. We don't have that. That's not where we're at. All you can say is God's doing something, and I want to watch, and I'm interested, and I just leave it at that. That's all I would do.
And so, yeah, I also think in the midst of all of this, we don't want to forget that uh, there was death, that there was a man who was killed. I think Corey Comparator. He dove in front of his family and he took a bullet, I think, to the head. And when you talk about providence and God's sovereignty, what does that mean for this family, right?
Yeah,
That, oh, so God turned the bullet into someone else, and I don't think that that's what I'm hearing people say, but the reality is that there was a tragic evil, and this man died in a act of heroism, shielding his family from harm, which is what the job of a man is. And he, should be praised for that. And we should pray for that family as well
yeah,
in the midst of this. And I think there are others that are injured. I don't know the full report to this day of what we've got going on, but there's still a lot going on. I think the other piece in that Mueller article that I really think was helpful is the concept of morality. All of a sudden, for at least like an hour, uh, everybody had a moral understanding of what was right and wrong in the world.
yeah,
And of course, that's evidence of God, So not only did God do something miraculous that says, wow, but also there was a universal response of condemnation and that we don't want this type of thing and that this is evil. And that's an important temperature to take of American populace. Do you trust in God? Do you trust in the God of the universe? And do you understand that your ability to recognize right and wrong and good and evil is a pointer to God? And I think that there's a good opportunity for us to take this not as God hath ordained Trump for this purpose, and rather say God has shown himself in a mighty way. And
yeah,
what this should be cause for all of us is repent.
yeah,
Whatever you do, we know the right answer for this is we need to repent. We need to be praying. We need to trust God, and we need to, as a nation, turn to Him. And
yeah.
if we don't, then there was a period in American history where a lot of people were shot and executed in riots, and this is the kind of thing that I think we've been spared temporarily from.
Yeah.
But be it prayer and walk with the Lord.
I think another perspective, and then we got to run.
Yeah.
Is, like, I love what Vodi Bakum. I remember when I first heard Vodi Bakum speak, I was probably 17. No, I was probably 19 years old. And he was talking about, he came to Cal Baptist. We were there, and he was talking about how, this idea, right, that God is the one who gives us life and breath. He is a good God. And despite all that we have done, all who we have been, the places we've been, the things that we've done, the things that we've thought, and how we have rebelled against him, and yet he continues to give us life. Like, that should put into perspective how good God is to us. And yet he sustains us. And so I think for everybody, there should be a place of humility for every person, saying, this God, he is the reason why I am still here now. And when he's ready for me to go, he'll be ready. I'll be, that'll be the time. And to just trust in that, but also recognize that, like, do I live for this one who my life hangs in the balance, that like he holds it all into his hands. So, that's it. That's all I got, man. That's all I've got for now.
Yeah, it's just an incredible moment. So, very quickly we'll be back into the normal grind and we'll forget. But I do think this is a great moment to just
100%.
recognize the hand of God is
Yeah.
active.
Yeah. So
All right,
thank
you want to
God
close
for
this?
what he did. Yeah. All right. Let's close out. May the Lord bless you and protect you. May the Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. May the Lord look with favor on you and give you peace. Hey,
All right.
thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you next time. Don't forget, like and subscribe, even if you don't like us. That's okay too.
All right. God bless. Take care, everyone.
Yeah. Bye bye.